On Saturday, the 3rd of June 2017, 3 killers drove a hired van into pedestrians in this central area of the British capital known as London Bridge. They also stabbed others here in Borough Market in an attack praised and claimed by the Daesh Takfiri group. It has been suggested Saudi Arabia and some of its regional allies have supported Takfiri terrorism, currently wreaking havoc in Iraq, Syria and beyond. The British parliamentary opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has warned against overreaction, saying we must resist Islamophobia and division and turn out in our determination to show our democracy is strong. He added, yes, we do need to have some difficult conversations, starting with Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf states that have funded and fueled extremist ideology. The public reported concerns about the attackers at least 2 years ago regarding extremist views and attempts to radicalise children in a local park. One witness contacted police in Barking, East London, about his views after he discussed ISIL-inspired terror attacks. But the man was not arrested and kept his passport. The same attacker even appeared in a documentary last year about British Takfiris and was filmed in a dispute with police. Which countries are responsible for sponsoring international terrorism? And is it time to arm the police on the streets of Britain? Simple questions with important answers. Why has Britain been attacked so many times in the last year by terrorists? We put this question to the public here in London. This is what they said.
What's causing that, to be honest, is like radical Islamics. And I know, as a Muslim, I know these people, they doesn't represent Islam. But anyway, they do it. I don't know where's the real cause, but I think the real cause is like in Islam, perhaps, or the people who say go fight. So they don't accept like to live in with people as like accept people for who they are. They just want to be like Muslims terrorists.
Well, because extremism has become acceptable in the UK.
What's made it acceptable?
Well, lack of integration, essentially. I do think multiculturalism has been a disaster. Although most people who dress as extremists, Muslims, aren't themselves murderers, they're going to bring their kids up to be alienated from British society, and that's what's happening. Their kids are then growing up and turning into murderers.
But I know that you could argue that there have been attacks in the past. It's not just terrorism. We had terrorism back when there was the IRA, and I guess that was based on religious conflict or interest that Britain interfered in. So it's just funny how people are going in uproar about this, but it's been happening quite a while back. Back in the 70s and stuff. And I think there's always going to be a case of terror attacks.
I think we're responsible for a lot of bad things that have happened in other countries, and a certain group of people are using their frustrations, and they've kind of gone to certain levels, maybe been pushed them by other groups of people to kind of get their own back on us for things that we've done in the past, and then maybe also using ideologies as a kind of mask for what they actually want to do politically to us.
If you look at everything that's been happening over the last, 10, 20, 30 years with IRA before, it's no great surprise really that these things happen if someone's got something really bad against us, I guess. In terms of now, I couldn't tell you, to be honest.
I don't know, maybe because we're such a high-profile country in the world that it's sort of like it makes the news because they're attacked Great Britain rather than attacking a smaller country. I don't know.
The lucky thing to say is that we haven't. In relation to other countries such as Afghanistan and Nigeria, we're actually very lucky. And that's down to, one of the reasons is that we are an island and the restriction of weapons is very tight. So therefore it's very hard for any potential terrorist to get hold of an AK-47 like they did in France. So the death tolls have been far lower than it has been in other countries around the world where weapon restrictions aren't as tight and it's more accessible, such as Nigeria and Afghanistan.
I think we have to look to several factors here. One is the British state collusion with terrorism in the Muslim world, compounded and basically harmonized with their NATO agenda and sometimes NATO overt war in the case of Libya, and covert not so covert in the case of Syria. The proxy forces that Britain have been using and abusing and manipulating a lot of particularly young people in the Muslim community. Over 1,000 Muslims went to join Daesh since 2011, 2012 in Syria, Iraq, Libya and other places. So the British state facilitated these people's movement there to conduct terrorism on the behalf of Western foreign policy. Now many of these people have returned. It's again British state collusion. Some people think failings, but I think there's something more systemic here in a lot of these people returning and conducting these operations now in this country. We had a similar situation in France as well in recent years. So these are the main factors, I think, of why Britain has been subjected to this terrorism, but also I don't think it can be disconnected, and people are pointing to this, that it's a mechanism that the state uses for its own political purposes as well. Now, there's some conspiracy element to this, but there's truth in some conspiracy, and also there's going to be some fallacy in conspiracy. So it's up to us to work out what is actually true in terms of the collusion and the relationship between the state and terrorism and political instability in the Middle East and also here.
Jeremy Corbyn said Saudi Arabia has sponsored terrorism around the world, which has in turn made Britain less safe. What does the public think?
I think he's right. Saudi Arabia always sponsored terrorists around the world, but now they changed their policy and they blame Qatar for it. Qatar always helped terrorism, but who's the big responsible? Of course, it's Saudi Arabia. They have the money, they have the oil, and they have the means to help these guys to do whatever they want to do.
Well, certainly the majority of the 9/11 terrorists were Saudis, and Wahhabism has been spread by the Saudi royal family, which is definitely one of the causes of terrorism. On the other hand, Corbyn actively supported IRA murderers and is now supporting anti-Israeli murderers. So, he's got nothing to brag about.
Well, I know that nothing's going to happen to Saudi Arabia, especially after Donald Trump has been making all these interesting deals with them.
Probably get like firearms from our troops, like if they take them hostage or whatever, or kill our troops out there. Like there's nothing to say that like they get our firearms and that kind of thing. So sponsorship that way, I guess.
Well, it's I think always in history and everything. It's a sad truth. I mean, look what the leader of Syria is doing. Former leader might be. He's using chemical weapons, and there's no one's actually attacking him because of the power interests in there.
I think at some point there might be called into question like the political problems between Saudi Arabia and ISIS and how we're involved in that. I think some people have already been questioned over that. I think it's just going to come to light more probably in the near future.
Well, I think it hasn't only made Britain far more unsafe, which is true, but it's made every country in the world far more unsafe. Britain, although they do sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and that does make the whole world a more violent place, to give weapons to a country with such a terrible human rights record as Saudi Arabia, but also they facilitate their actions abroad. Currently, Saudi Arabia is funding terrorists in countries such as Syria and also facilitating a bombing of Yemen, both of which would not be possible without, number one, the diplomatic clearance by Britain, because Britain is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and 2, by the weapons sold to Saudi Arabia by Britain and other countries.
Listen, the Labour Party for a century has been promoting terrorism all around the world as British state colonial terrorism. So there's nothing new. Saudi Arabia, compared to British state terrorism, administered by the Labour Party itself, be it the most left-wing governments of Clement Attlee after the Second World War, conducted brutal colonial state terrorism against the people of the colonies or the former colonies. Now, Jeremy Corbyn is not wrong to say that Saudi Arabia is a facilitator of terrorism, but where there's a problem here is as I've mentioned, the Labour Party actually is a bigger terrorist organisation than the Saudi regime, but also it confuses the nature of the relationship. Riyadh is not controlling Britain, Britain is controlling Riyadh. Riyadh did not come to fruition and existence by itself, no. Riyadh and Saudi Arabia is a creation of British colonialism in the late 19th century. Saudi Arabia can only exist because of massive support from particularly London and Washington. So when Jeremy Corbyn says Saudi Arabia is the problem, it indirectly has an effect of deflecting from the senior relationship and the senior leading role of London over and above Riyadh.
Is the Prime Minister able to address the terrorism problem and make Britain safe again? Here's what the public told us.
Well, I didn't see any action from Theresa May until now, but if she's gonna do something, I think she have to. But when you see like they were watching the terrorists and they know who they are, but they didn't catch them, that's ridiculous. Even back, I'm from Iraq. When we know somebody he's a terrorist, we go straight away to him, take him to prison and put him under the judge. This is the best thing to do. You're not gonna let him loose and do whatever he want to do.
I don't think she's going to do a lot, no. I'm not sure there's a lot that you can do, but one thing would be to press hard on integration. I think it's wrong to do what the French did and ban burqas and so on, but pressing for making it mandatory for children to go to British-type schools, and that, you know, people should dress in a Western fashion. Don't make it illegal, but they should be actively encouraged to do so, and people who don't do so shouldn't be able to get work and so on, you know?
I don't think it's something that you can stop altogether. There's nothing to say people like can manipulate someone. Like, no one can get inside someone's head like totally to see how they're thinking or what they're thinking.
It feels like it's more of a power struggle with that, because you'd have to be desperate to make a deal with a party that's got very different views to the Tories. If she thinks of the greater good, she might as well step down and find someone actually got more of a level head on things. I mean, she's trying to stay strong and stable, but I remember reading something in the newspaper about saying how stupid she sounded when she mentioned that, and with the situation with more of Labour getting more of the seats and then demanding a second election. But we're in an uncertain future, because let's be honest, Jeremy Corbyn's policies are quite amazing to think of, and he keeps on chatting about we should target 5%, but do they have billions to actually help this country?
Not in the current state of affairs, no. Whichever house is in control needs to get that house in order, and it clearly isn't right now. So right now, no. Once we get our own affairs in order, government downwards, then maybe, but not right now.
I think Theresa May is doing same old, same old. She's already turned a blind eye to Saudi Arabia's support of terrorism in Syria, and has even helped facilitate to fund it. Theresa May, along with the other Conservatives, were one of the parties which helped to fund rebels in Syria during the 2011 uprising. And ever since then, they've given them information, communications and weapons supports to try to help them topple Syria, which in turn will turn Syria into another home for terrorists, such as they have to Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya. So I think that yes, it does make Britain and the rest of the world far more unsafe if Theresa May is continuing the policies of the Conservative Party in the past. But you also have to remember that ever since the election, Theresa May has been flirting with the idea of siding with the DUP, which breaks the Good Friday Agreement of Ireland and therefore opens up a whole new powder keg of terrorism.
Theresa May is still the Prime Minister of Britain after the general election. She is unable to have a constructive approach to the political situation in this country, and that's because of 2 or 3 reasons. First of all is the Brexit problem, which is opening up crisis after crisis. So until we have a political leadership and movement of this country that can defend migrants and deal with them constructively, deal with the Brexit issue and resist that constructively, unless we're someone who can turn around British foreign policy to that one of mutual respect and cooperation and a real partnership economically and politically, until we have all of these things, we're not going to get anywhere. There's going to be more political instability. Everyone is feeling that political instability. So it's an interesting situation where the situation is in political freefall. Everyone can feel that. Even vast swathes of the Tory party have voted Jeremy Corbyn. So people are starting to wake up to the depth of the problems that we're facing. And the only option they have in front of them is Corbyn to get them out of this mess. Whether Corbyn can get us out of this mess remains to be seen, but I think we're going to see a Labour government very soon.
On the evening of Saturday the 3rd of June, 3 attackers launched a low-tech assault on the public in the capital's London Bridge area. This left at least 7 people dead and wounded almost 50 others. 8 police officers fired 50 shots at the 3 attackers, killing all of them at the scene of the crime. From the point the police were alerted to the death of the murderers, only 8 minutes elapsed. does the public think more armed police on the streets of the United Kingdom would be the right approach to deal with the terrorism threat?
To be honest, for Britain, I don't think more police with guns on the streets will be great for that, because we have a lot of tourists coming here, and when they see like more weapons on the outside, they're gonna be like afraid. But if it's gonna help, I don't mind that.
Nothing to do with religion or anything like that, but we do have people in this country with British passports who hate us, who actively condemn this government, who despise everything about us, about our Western life, and they want to change it. That should be something that I think, well, if you don't like it, there's the door. I'll pay for your plane ticket.
With firearms, you'd have the same problems you have in the US, with an unexplained weight of arms deployment towards parts of the community which would be seen as racist.
So I think just with police being armed, that's not going to help it. It may stop them causing further damage. Like, for example, as soon as police got to the attack, they could have just shot them. But in terms of actually stopping an attack altogether, I don't think it will help in that way.
Well, I don't think it's neither a good or bad thing. I don't think it's particularly effective. Fighting terrorism is actually very boring. It's somebody in the media deciding which words to use, choosing to call ISIS Daesh instead of their preferred name, the Islamic State. Or it's an intelligence officer talking to community police officers, something which Theresa May and the Conservatives have cut. So when we see armed police officers in the streets, it's really more of an assurance to voters to make politicians look as if they're doing something. Whereas in having armed officers in the streets isn't that much effective unless it's outside a place such as the Parliament or other government buildings to protect an organised attack. But having them in towns and squares is not going to do anything good or bad when it comes to terrorism. It's quite neutral. It's really security theatre for voters. It makes politicians look as if they're doing something, and it makes it visible. See, we're putting these armed officers on the streets. You can see the results of what the government is doing. But fighting terrorism is mostly just behind the scenes and incredibly boring. It's not very entertaining for voters.
I don't think, on the one hand, I think it makes sense for Corbyn Labour Party to do that because the Police Federation are very alienated from the Tory party because of the Tory cuts against the Police Federation. So it made sense for Corbyn to get that support from the police and also from that pro-police community in this country. But interestingly, the Corbyn camp is not all pro-police at all. Although a lot of the camp has been pushed into having a pro-police agenda because of Corbyn's manifesto policy. Actually, a lot of Corbyn's followers do not see the police and the counter-terrorism police, or the army for that matter, etc., as being constructive institutions for relations between people in this country and relations between this country and other countries in the world. Indeed, many people who support Corbyn see the police correctly as a force of harassment and bullying on the behalf of the elites and the more powerful. Many young people, especially if you're black and Muslim, you're harassed a lot and humiliated by the police. There's police brutality and even worse in terms of deaths in police custody. So I think it's been a contradictory approach of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party to try and get the support of people for the Labour Party in trying to respond to the failings of the British state in relation to collusion with terrorism, in demanding police. So it kind of points people in a right direction in a distorted way, but it's also just electoral opportunism. It's elections. This is what politicians do. They say opportunistic things to get as much votes as they can, and that's not necessarily reflective of what's ethical and correct for oppressed people.
Saudi Arabia and Daesh share the same ideology. But while Daesh is the UK's #1 enemy, the Saudis are amongst the UK's closest allies. How, in the public's view, can this have happened?
Money. It's easier that way to say. It's about money and control. Everybody want to control, like it's a cake, and everyone will have a piece of the cake. So Saudi Arabia is supply Daesh, and they want to help them to do whatever they want to do. At the same time, they say, well, they're not our problem. We're allies for the United States, for the UK, but the truth is, they supply Daesh.
Mainly money. Arguably, we should have invaded Saudi Arabia rather than Syria, but or Iraq. But you know, they're rich.
And that's what's caused it, the difference in behaviour?
Yeah, our behaviour, yeah.
In one way, it probably benefits us somehow, economically or trade-wise. But on the other hand, there's that moral question of, well, if you have a group that's somehow even directly involved in costing our lives, directly attacking us, then is that the moral choice? But that goes way back, doesn't it? If you think about it, I studied history, and it's one of those things that it repeats itself, and it actually really does.
How did we get here? I think we got here really by selling out. You sell arms to one faction of society or international society for your own gain, and you rue the day you did when they turn on you.
I think that must have been something that stemmed from something that's gone in their own country, a problem, and then we've just taken a side on that. The ones that obviously are allies, our friends, we've taken that side. So it's just something that's then, it seems we've taken sides with one of them, a side's come against us. That's just what's happened.
Money?
Well, as we've said before, Britain facilitates Saudi Arabia's horrible human rights regime by selling them weapons and giving them diplomatic support. Now, you could make the argument that you have to be lenient with countries with bad human rights record because that's how diplomacy works, but it goes much further than that. The Conservatives, many of them have not only sold them weapons and defended it in the House of Commons, but also received gifts such as fruit baskets and trips to Saudi Arabia by their government. So you have to ask, what part of receiving fruit baskets, hundreds of pounds worth of them, from corrupt politicians in Saudi Arabia is helping to fight terrorism? It gives Saudi Arabia a green light to do whatever they want in the Middle East. Sanctions, although in some cases it can be ethically corrupt when you're putting sanctions on a country that is a victim or underdeveloped, but putting a sanctions on a wealthy, powerful country such as Saudi Arabia, it works. It shows other powerful countries that this country is something that you do not want to be entangled with, unless you want to be involved in whatever human rights abuses they're entangled with, such as the bombing of Yemen or the decapitation of political victims in Saudi Arabia.
You know, it's very funny when people say, you know, Daesh and the Saudi state have the same ideology, and they do have the same ideology, but frankly, Daesh and the Western countries have a very similar ideology, and we could also argue that actually Daesh, the supremacism of Daesh is a direct creation of the supremacists of the colonialists. So the colonialists also operate like that. I mean, if you look at Daesh, it's like Grand Theft Auto in a false Muslim shroud. Everything that you do in Grand Theft Auto, which is you kill people, you injure people, you rob people, you sexually assault women, this is what Daesh is doing. So yes, Daesh and Saudi Arabia have a directly obvious similar ideology because they're dressed the same, they claim the same faith, it looks the same. It's more complex though when you see the sophistication of the West. The way they say we are democratic, we are civilized, but you see what they do, not what they say. It makes Daesh look like the little mouse of terrorism when you compare it with the Portuguese, the Spanish, the British, the American, and the French colonialists. So in a nutshell, Daesh is the asymmetric mirror reflection of Western white supremacy. And what I mean by that is it's the little mini-me of Western white supremacy. And we have that in all communities across the world. You have that supremacism in the Jewish community in the form of Zionism, in the Hindu community, in the Buddhist community, in all communities. So I'm just saying that because there's nothing particularly unique and exceptional about the Muslim community, and we have to trace it back to its conceptual roots and to its power relation roots, and that takes you back to Paris, London and Washington.
MI5 has investigated how it missed the danger posed by attackers in the past. But perhaps more worrying is the fact that the principal funder of Takfiri terrorism seems to be Britain's ally, Saudi Arabia, to which the UK also supplies weapons, heavy artillery and political support. British opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn says it's time for the UK to hold difficult conversations with Saudi Arabia and other Arab states in the wake of the London terror attack. The leap in support for him and his party in the recent UK general election suggests that perhaps the public think he's right.